I was watching some anime the other day, and it got me thinking about some of the character tropes we see across different media. And then I decided it would be fun to design some characters based off of those tropes. So I picked out a couple and I gave it a try. The first trope is one I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with. The dumb jock. Now this is one of the most common character tropes, especially in Western media. And to put it into the simplest terms, the dumb jock refers to a character that's dumb, antagonistic, and athletic. This is a character that puts his sport of choice before everything else. And because of his natural talent in said sport, plus some conventional good looks, he rules the land he finds himself on. Most commonly a high school or a university setting. Aside from the popularity he's gained from his athletic performance, he's naturally bigger and stronger than a lot of the characters around him. So the dumb jock can be very egotistical because he just thinks he's better than everyone else. He's the type of person to call himself a superior alpha male, and he exudes toxic masculinity. He also views himself as the king of the crop, so he really doesn't like it when people step on his toes or get in his way. And because of this, he's quick to anger and he can be pretty aggressive. And unfortunately, he gets away with everything. Cheating, bullying, breaking rules. He doesn't pay any mind to the repercussions because all he cares about is playing his sport. And he's gotten away with this for so long that he's under the impression he's too important to suspend or put on the bench. Now, this trope might seem all bad, but there is one silver lining to this whole mess. Starting out as an antagonistic bully with a big ego leaves the author a lot of room for character development. Usually, the dumb jock will start out as a bad guy that, picks on one of the main characters or something like that. And eventually, towards the end of the story, he'll have a moment or a realization that leads to a change of heart. One where he starts to see his wrongs for what they are instead of some privilege that was handed to him. The main character or a love interest will usually lead them down a path of self-discovery and maturity, where they realize the world doesn't revolve around them and they become a better person because of it. The next trope I decided to do was the damsel in distress. This trope is also fairly common and is amongst some of the oldest tropes in media. The damsel in distress refers to a young, beautiful woman that finds herself in need of saving, usually by a strong male hero. She is typically one of two people: a woman of status, most commonly a princess, taken for material gain or leverage, or she's the love interest of the main character and a rival and or enemy has taken her for ransom to lure the MC into a trap of some sort. In both cases, though, she's usually hidden and locked away in some way, and she just can't get out. Similarly, the damsel in distress can also be one of two people personality-wise, which is mostly because the approach to writing women has changed quite a bit over the years. Earlier depictions of these damsels have them portrayed as unassuming, innocent, and helpless, but writers in recent decades have been making some of their damsels more fierce, intelligent, and capable. But regardless of her capabilities, she's still in a situation where she cannot save herself, hence the need for saving. But the implications of the term damsel in distress are still ever prevalent and understood by people watching modern media, which is actually why I made the decision to lean into earlier depictions of these women. Because when I think of a damsel in distress, I don't imagine someone that's strong or capable. I imagine someone that's meek and helpless. And when I look into how the internet describes a damsel in distress, most agree with me. I love the idea of making the damsel a tough lady, and it can be done very well. But even in most modern media, if there's gonna be a damsel in distress, she probably won't be that tough, because then the writer can't make their main character the hero of the situation. It's really only when the damsel is actually one of the main characters that the writer can make this angle of the damsel in distress work. So I figured it would be more true to the trope if I just made my character more on the helpless side. I do find the evolution of the damsel in distress to be incredibly fascinating, though. Like, it's actually really interesting to look at an older trope like this, because you can actually see how it's been shifting and changing with the culture around it. And that subtle shift is so easy to see when you directly compare how this trope was handled by two different writers in two different times. Take the use of the damsel in distress in Popeye the Sailor from 1933 versus Shrek in 2001 or Tangled in 2010. They're 70, 80 years apart, but drastically different from one another. And that's because the trope grew with our culture. And I don't know about you guys, but I think that that's really cool. Anyway, the damsel in distress is one of the first places my brain went when I thought of your standard character trope, so it was only natural that I would include it in this video. Next up is the most wholesome of the tropes on my list, the cinnamon roll. This character can be described as being too pure for this world because of their childlike innocence, sweetness, and seemingly never-ending love and support for the people around them. They're a genuinely good-natured person who's got an upbeat, positive attitude and is nice to nearly everyone they interact with, regardless of who they are. They firmly believe that everyone deserves kindness and everyone has some good in their heart. But unfortunately, this belief can get them into a bit of trouble sometimes. Because of this want to see the very best in people, they tend to be overly trusting, and this can lead to them being easily tricked or betrayed by bad people. Luckily, they have some fiercely protective friends around to keep them safe and get them out of these situations when they happen. And they're just as fiercely protective right back to these friends too. They just show it in a different way. You see, one hallmark of the cinnamon roll is wanting to make sure everyone is happy and healthy. And a lot of the times, they'll do it in a very self-sacrificial manner, putting aside their own needs and happiness to make sure everyone else is happy instead. They're always going out of their way to check on people and make sure they're okay and make sure they're laughing. But this internalized selflessness and need to help people can put them in a bit of a tough spot sometimes, particularly in conflict. See, these characters could probably kill you if you tick them off properly, but they're incredibly hard to aggravate, and that's because they're major pacifists. They aren't a fan of conflict or aggression, so they find themselves stuck in the middle when fights or arguments occur, acting as a mediator and a peacekeeper because they're afraid the group's gonna fall apart and they think they need to keep it together. And in a sense, they're right. The cinnamon roll is often the heart of the group, and the glue that keeps everyone together. So often they find that it's up to them to keep the peace. And this usually comes from a deep fear of losing their loved ones or being left behind and forgotten. These are people that they've come to see as their family, so they're not just going to fight to keep them happy, they're going to fight to keep them together. Overall, the cinnamon roll is just a total sweetheart that longs for connection. And once they get it, they're intensely loyal, and they'll go above and beyond for their new family. Next up, the total opposite of our last trope is the bad boy. This is a troubled young man that's mysterious, brooding, and rude to the people around him. He has a problem with authority and rules, and tends to push back against societal norms. And this refusal to rules and society, plus the fact that he comes off as self-centered and brash, can lead to him being a bit of an outcast or a lone wolf. But he's really attractive, and he's the strong, silent type. So regardless of his social status, he drives the women around him absolutely crazy. Across most media, women seem to love a bad boy, and he goes along with it, being a total player because it's a bit of an outlet for him. But he has trouble committing to any long-lasting relationships, and most of the time, he doesn't think he's really capable of real love, or that he deserves it at all. This feeling of being undeserving of love is usually attributed to a tragic past or an ongoing trauma, which leaves our bad boy pretty mentally unstable and heavily guarded. He might lash out and see his emotions as more of a weakness than anything, so he'll bury them deep and build up a tough exterior to protect himself. Because, you see, the bad boy is constantly fighting an internal battle with himself over what he's been through. And since the world has been so harsh to him, he's gonna be harsh back. But over the course of the story, he'll start coming to terms with everything, and then he'll change to be more open and trusting with the people around him. And that's usually because of meeting one special person. This could be a close friend of his, or more commonly, a love interest that didn't give up on him even when things got tough. And eventually, they chipped away at his protective exterior and were able to help him start healing from his trauma. The bad boy will progress from an edgy, seemingly egotistical playboy to a protective, tsundere-ish secret softie that will put his life on the line for the people he cares about. He's got a long ways to go before he's healed from his past, but he's come a long way too, all thanks to the help of his friends. The last trope I decided to make a character for was the smart but average girl. This is a girl who exhibits intelligence over beauty, and as such, she's very intellectually gifted, but not that conventionally attractive. Interestingly enough, even though she's usually drawn to be pretty or cast as a beautiful woman, she's considered average or boring looking by most of the people around her. And it only goes downhill from there, because she also has a lack of social understanding. She's written as a quirky, awkward, introverted girl who would much rather be in her books than out in the real world. And to make matters worse, she's incredibly clumsy and tends to bump into people or walls, trip, and then drop things frequently. All of this just adds up to make her a prime victim for bullying. And unfortunately, in most media, she's picked on for one or all of these attributes. So naturally, she's pretty anxious, withdrawn, and self-conscious. And sadly, there's also a disconnect from her peers, because not only is she smarter than most of them, but she's also more passionate about her academics than most of them are. She might be depressed and lonely because she feels misunderstood and unseen. But despite all these barriers, she is confident in two things: her intelligence and her morals. She knows exactly what she's capable of and what she believes in, and she's a very driven and ambitious person with strong opinions that she's willing to speak out about. And as the story progresses, she'll just gain more confidence and start fighting back against the bullying, usually utilizing her intelligence to do so, making it clear that she's too smart for them to get to her, or that she's smart enough to ignore them. And this might come from a need to prove that she's above them, or just to convince herself that she's unaffected by them. Either way, I find that the smart but average girl trope is a great lesson for finding self-worth and moving past the opinions of others, and loving yourself for what you are instead of what people think you should be. So all in all, it's a really good trope, and it can be a wonderful writing device. And there you have it. Today I looked at 5 character tropes: the dumb jock, the damsel in distress, the cinnamon roll, the bad boy, and the smart but average girl. There are so many other character tropes that I didn't have time for though, so let me know if you enjoyed this, and I might go ahead and make this into a series, because it was a lot of fun. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and leave this video here, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye!